Alrighty. Hello, guys. This is Kim Shang. I am the podcast host, one of the podcast hosts for Newborn Libertarian, and also running for state senate in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I am here to go through an interesting, I would say a novel of a comment for someone that decided to talk about libertarianism in a very strange way, and I think they got a lot of things wrong, so bear with me. This is an extremely long comment followed by another wrong comment that I'm going to correct here, so just bear with me. It starts out with, I think that, like a lot of other political terminology, talk about political schools of thought is only useful when defined. There is a big difference between the libertarianism ranted about by the alt-right guys. They are almost always guys, and of those are almost always white guys who've almost always been lucky enough to work at traditional industrial jobs or run their own businesses most of their lives or aspire to, and the libertarianism espoused by von Mises and most economists. Understanding this difference and its effects on the culture of libertarianism as a tribe has led me to distance myself from the people currently using the label. But then again, I always distance myself from such communities. I don't like people much, and the sort of people that seek political power are usually those I dislike the most. And we can already see what's wrong with this. I'm not white, nor a guy. So, anyway. The former group of libertarians are often victims of limited perspectives. They believe that if all rules were removed and people were free, full stop, that people would both understand the philosophical underpinnings of that freedom and, phone vibrated in the middle of that. Jeez, people sending me emails, which probably are, they're important emails, but just want to get to this comment. Anyway. That people would both understand the philosophical underpinnings of that freedom and defend that philosophy. They are apparently blind to the actual events around them, where most people are perfectly happy to exploit whatever freedoms they possess while feeling no duty to make sure that others possess those freedoms in kind. Not only do people not, when given the freedom of guns and commerce, the kinds of freedoms these kinds of libertarians seem the most interested in, which this is starting to get a little vague, recreate the mythical good old days of America, which is merely a romanticized version of the post-World War II era from the point of view of a middle-class white male, which is strange. Once again, I'm not white nor male. They instead fall to a sort of least common denominator politics. Are we talking about Anyway, if there is no immediate and obvious profit to something, it is generally ignored, and political philosophy beyond the basics of tribalism has little immediate and obvious profit. And once again, libertarianism is about individuality and the individual is sovereign, so I don't understand why the word tribalism is in here. This means no one wants to maintain or work on infrastructure, for example. I guess maybe, whatever. Everyone wants to be an exciting Steve Jobs, not a boring city planner, which means all that boring maintenance and infrastructure, which we desperately need, just gets neglected. Many libertarians seem to think that without some sort of collectivist shared values, which used to come from religion and moral philosophy, with the former generally abandoned by the educated and the latter abandoned by almost everyone, social institutions will still form and people will still work with those institutions to collectively create a holistic society. There's no reason, empirical or logical, to believe this will occur. People, in the absence of values, fall back on the oldest values, tribalism, and the power of violence. The libertarianism espoused by most of this sort is like the anarchism espoused by most activists, that of the child who doesn't want to have to follow the rules. Once again, all right, he's proven that he's got some ignorance here, because anarchist, the actual term means no ruler, not no rules. So get that straight for one. And it's not most libertarians. There are libertarians who want small government, and if government is to exist, they're only to exist to protect life, liberty, and property, nothing more. Nothing more than that. So get your terms straight. Anarchy means without rulers, not without rules. And people would freely be able to associate and have their own governance. So anarchists aren't against governing, just against coercive, crazy, forceful, violent government like we have now. So that's why a lot of anarchists prefer to be called voluntarists, because they want everything voluntary, because people usually like to form groups. Think of it like maybe a bunch of small HOAs. People are allowed to have their own governing bodies as long as there isn't some gigantic centralized bloated government like we have now. So hope that made that clear. The libertarianism of the economist is a different animal entirely, which is strange because libertarians value economics highly. But whatever, apparently there's a different branch. And is one I would subscribe to myself, where the mathematics all we had to consider, whoa, okay, all right, we already have a problem here because libertarians don't really ascribe to a lot of mathematics and economics. That's why Austrian school is so awesome, because it doesn't have mathematics. People aren't numbers. People don't always act rationally. I mean, just think of it, if you've ever been around women, because I'm a woman, women aren't always rational. It's just like if we had to go to a wonderful store where there's a bunch of ice cream, we had to think of which one we wanted to choose. It'd be real hard. We wouldn't just mathematically just go, I'm going to choose Chunky Monkey. People aren't a math problem. It's that sort of thing. So that's why Austrian economics is good. And some follow the Chicago school, but if you're talking about Keynesian crazy, where everything's a math equation, you're already wrong. So I don't know what the heck he's talking about here. This libertarianism is built on the beauty and elegance of the equilibriums which will naturally come into being in the unbounded, finite, in-player game that is a society, eventually at a certain, almost definitely much smaller population with a specific amount, almost definitely more than we have, and in balanced proportions of base resources and energy, and with a certain amount, almost definitely too much, of suffering along the way. See the problem? The libertarianism of the first kind is a philosophy that assumes that all of humanity will be most happy and most functional if they behave like idolized Americans of the 1950s? Interesting. The libertarianism of the second kind is a philosophy that assumes that humanity is a species of mathematicians and philosophers who will be satisfied more by the elegance of the balance of logic in some foreseen future than by a good, satisfying human life lived here and now. Neither is a philosophy made for humans as they exist or the reality in which they exist, except that you mentioned von Mises way at the beginning, who talked about human action, which is a gigantic tome about economics, which literally is about how humans act. Maybe you need to sit down and read this, because apparently with the huge tome that you have written, you seem to have the ability to read huge tomes. So you should read that, and this would explain a lot about how Austrian economics is just based on humans act. It's pretty easy. It's called praxeology. Humans act. Quite important. And it's not some weird fantasy, like, seriously. It's all about how, people act, and you have money and you buy a product from somebody. You trade your money for their product. It's not that complicated. Communism is no better, and for the same reason, it too has two manifestations, that of the poor worker and that of the educated activist. It too is built for a sort of animal we aren't, in a sort of universe we don't live in. And trying to compare communism to libertarianism is just terrible. They're like two polar opposites. The main reason both extremes have the same problem is that they are remnants of a previous era of humanity. Please tell me when we had libertarianism as a political system at any point in time, and I would just congratulate you. About the closest we ever got is about, in the 1700s, maybe when the Constitution was ratified, but even then it wasn't as libertarian as it could be, but hey, we were semi-close, but it still wasn't a libertarian society, so good job on trying to make sense of that one, and at that point, just totally, we never had a libertarian society, so good job. These philosophies were replacements for religion and have functioned for their own states similarly to how religion functioned for the old theocratic states. We replace God with Smith's invisible hand, oh goodness, or Marx's historical dialectic. We must let go of such superstitions, oh gosh, and build a philosophy of politics and economy made for humans as they actually are. And not how we wish they were or afraid they are. And the world as it actually exists, not as we wish it was or are afraid it is. Once again, von Mises, human action, praxeology, about how humans act. Oh my goodness. All right. Now, apparently there was another one here. Let me see. Let me try this one. All right. Whew. You could probably say this in less words. I'm just saying. I'm not trying to be rude, but make your point in less words. It'd be great. So the big libertarian thing is to get rid of government, or in a functional American context, to increase personal liberty and responsibility. Compare that to the opposite pole of political theory, communism, where you see maximum government involvement and minimum personal liberty. Intermism in the defense of liberty is no vice. And intermism, I can barely see that. We don't live in that kind of world. It's pretty neat to look at all of the political philosophies and argue about which one is correct because of the inherent perfection of its principles. I do it all the time, but that is all poppycock if the system doesn't work in practice. And how would you know if it does until you try implementing it? Duh! Goodness, we're just waiting for somebody to try to implement libertarianism, but hey, let's go ahead and implement socialism, even though it has been implemented 8 gazillion times, even in Venezuela, and just everything falls apart. But apparently America has decided, hey, we could do socialism better. Whatever. Governing a country is like tending a garden. Oh gosh, it's about to get poetic, huh? The trend is always toward the natural tendencies of the system. In a garden, this means reverting to the wild, which means being overgrown by weeds or simply indigenous species. The weeds creep in, and if you don't do something about them, they will do with your garden exactly what they do with the forest. I say that's like libertarianism. Oh my gosh, here we go. Hands off, let the people make their own decisions. Let our society develop unrestrained by the influences of the government. Oh, great, because this is the nirvana fallacy. If you guys understand what the nirvana fallacy is, it's basically putting down somebody else's system without looking at the faults in your system. So apparently he has decided to say, hey, libertarianism is terrible. Let me tell you about all the faults in that one, and not actually point out the faults in the government that we already have. So if you're going to compare a system and say it has faults, please compare it to the system that you advocate for, because come on, we all know our government that we have right now is not perfect and has lots of problems. So, nirvana fallacy. This is very common for people who don't like libertarianism. All right, let me see where I was at. Now, let's take a look at liberal political ideas. Use government to solve these problems. Turns out Roundup kills the invasive weeds. Better round up the fuck out of these gardens so the weeds will die. Oh no, we use too much Roundup, everything died. Turns out that watering the plants makes them happier and more abundant than the rain and groundwater that would normally be their only source of water. Well, better fucking flood this place with water. Oh no, we drowned all the plants. Okay, but that water is good for plants and that Roundup kills the weeds. Too little Roundup and all the weeds die. Apply it in the wrong place, your plants die. Too much or little water, etc. You get the picture. So I'm functional. Are taxes good? Are they bad? I don't know, buddy. Is an axe good or bad? What? What kind of comparison is that? Well, I guess it's a tool that can be used to better society or damage it. Taxation is a tool that discourages a certain behavior. Overused, it probably strangles our plants, to use the previous metaphor, and unused, it allows society destructive behavior to run rampant. I've gone on too long, but I think you get the idea. Call me a functionalism, although I prefer the term social abstain. That or free market communist. Oh gosh, free market communist. There's no way you could be a free market communist, because communism wants everything to just be, there's just no control. Oh, the free market just doesn't involve the state at all, like it's hands off. But communism wouldn't allow a free market. Oh my goodness, interesting. But let's get back to the taxation part. So you're saying it discourages a certain behavior. Of course, they decided in some states to tax cigarettes super high so people would stop buying them. And of course, there was that whole thing about in New York about the soda tax, that they want to tax sodas, or like ban large sodas or whatever. So tell me, why do they tax your income? Is that supposed to discourage you from working? Interesting. And if taxation is so great and it's supposed to help the society, why isn't it transparent? I mean, sure, go ahead and tax me if it's going to be for something good, but shouldn't I be able to see where it's going? Everybody says it's supposed to be for a good thing. That's great. Then can I see what this great thing is? And has it ever occurred to anyone that government is this gigantic business machine that doesn't actually turn out a product at all? It doesn't actually make money. In fact, it's all funded by our tax dollars. Isn't that interesting? They don't make their own money. They are literally paid by our pockets. Interesting, but nobody wants to bring that up. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and say to the free market communists, it's impossible to be a free market communist. And before I end this, I'm going to go ahead and tell you how you can't be a free market communist right here. Now, communism, full definition from Merriam-Webster's dictionary, is a theory advocating elimination of private property, a system in which goods are owned in common and are available to all as needed. Doctrine based on revolutionary Marxian socialism and Marxian Leninism that was the official ideology of the Union of Soviet Social Republics, USSR, by the way. A totalitarian system of government in which a single authoritarian party controls state-owned means of production. A final stage of society in Marxist theory in which the state has withered away and economic goods are distributed equitably. Communist systems collectively. Now, now, the full definition of free market: an economy operating by free competition, an economic market or system in which prices are based on competition among private businesses and not controlled by a government. Interesting, I don't know. You can try to put those two definitions together, but one of these seems a lot less constrained, and the other one seems severely constrained. So good luck on trying to be a free market communist.